Hello and welcome. As one of the most admired and respected women in the music industry, she has stayed ahead of the game by constantly innovating. But beyond selling albums by the tens of millions, she's considered one of the most dedicated humanitarians in the business. This week on 101, meet music star and activist Annie Lennox. It was sheer hard work and determination that took this musician from her working-class roots in Scotland to an award-winning career that few can match. Described by Rolling Stone magazine as one of the 100 greatest singers of all time, and even labelled the greatest white soul singer alive by the media, Annie Lennox went on from the remarkable success of the Eurythmics to be known as one of the most active humanitarians in the music business. She famously wears her HIV Positive T-shirt to highlight the importance of tackling the disease, particularly in Africa, and continues to visit the continent, offering her famous voice to help create change. In spite of the huge demands placed on her, Annie Lennox manages to balance her activism with a musical career that still makes her one of the world's leading singers. Well, Annie, it's such a pleasure to have a chance to have some time with you.
Likewise, I'm delighted to be here.
Let's see what got you to where you are now. You were born on Christmas Day in Aberdeen, in Scotland at a time. Your father was a shipyard worker, your mother was a cook and a housewife as well. It was tough times economically, wasn't it?
So different, you know. Looking back, television was black and white, and we were lucky to have a television set, you know, and I can still see that kind of curve in the shape of the television set, you know. It's nothing like a flat screen, that kind of boxy, Bakelite type of televisions. And looking back as a child, my memory tends to be a lot in black and white, curiously enough, and it wasn't. Then colour television came, and I remember that moment, that one neighbour had a colour television set, and everybody went to look at the colour television set. It was a miracle.
Your parents did make a huge sacrifice for you. They, at a time when it was tough for them financially, they started to give you piano lessons when you were 7. And I guess that was the sort of start of the interest in music, was it?
Well, just to say that my family didn't have a lot of money to go around. We weren't absolutely poor, but every penny had to be accounted for, saved, and scrupulously, you know, rigorously economised.
With the piano lessons, did you take to it naturally?
I love music, and I love music from as far back as I can remember. Music played a big role in my life. Just listening to music or hearing something, and I kind of always have to respond to that. If I hear music, I have to move to it. And I think when I was a little girl, I was just like a sponge for music. And, well, I'm not a great piano player, but I'm very drawn to it.
I gather your dad was a big music fan too. He was also quite an accomplished bagpipe player.
Yeah, I was. Strange. I don't know any accomplished bagpipe players anymore. I'm sure there must still be. But actually, bagpipe playing is really... Because I used to sit and listen to my father play and watch his fingers go over the holes, and it's quite complicated because they have to do these kind of very embroidered, decorative things. And he was good. He was really, really good.
You actually had a sort of on and off relationship, or troubled relationship. He was very overprotective of you, wasn't he?
Well, being the fact that I was the only daughter, and that there's this huge generation gap that emerged between those people, those kids that were born around the war, and then after the war. You know, the war was a hugely impactful event on people's lives. And if you were a teenager, as my father was during those war years, you actually... I think it was difficult. I think it was very difficult. And he used to say to me that he didn't actually have a youth, which is completely the opposite of my upbringing, particularly my father. So I think there was a bit of a clash.
What about your mother? What was she like, and how was your relationship with her?
My mother was a very dedicated housewife, and she was a very good cook, and she was, you know, when I think about my mum, I feel a little sad, because I know that when she was very young, she had to sort of do a lot of that domestic chores. It's like a lot of women have had to do. She was 14, she used to have to clean the house and all those things. And those were in the days when you didn't have a washing machine, you didn't have a tumble dryer, you know, it was very physical still. And yeah, so I have a lot of respect for all the work. So my mother was a working woman. She just worked a lot. And I would have liked to have seen her having a little bit more fun, a little bit more leisure. I have tremendous respect for women. And I don't feel that they get the kind of, the real respect that they ought to have.
Now, you actually were singing along to songs, a lot of Beatles songs, I think, in those days. Like you said, you had this love of music. Who were your early musical influences?
Well, there were lots, and my taste is very eclectic, and things that I learned at school had a huge influence on me. I had a really, really sweet choir mistress that used to teach all these really amazing songs that are still in my head, they're still in my repertoire. But obviously, we would have a little transistor radio, and I mean, Radio Caroline or Radio 1. They had a huge influence in everybody's household because, you know, as you got dressed to go to school, that was the radio station you'd tune into, and you'd hear the top 30, top 40, whatever. I don't think there's ever been a time like that since.
But still, you seem to have a slant towards performance fairly early on. And you actually got a scholarship to the Royal Academy of Music in London.
Well, I was accepted for the Royal Academy, which was a shock to me because I didn't really ever expect to get in, I guess. I had an idea in my head that I wanted to be a classical musician, and I had a notion of what that would be like. But actually, when I actually did get to the Academy, I swiftly realised that when it came down to my personality and it came down to my motivation, the classical scene wasn't really right for me, and so that left me with a bit of a dilemma because I didn't quite know what to do with myself after that, and I didn't want to go back to Scotland because I felt I'd done that.
You said it was lonely times. I mean, those 3 years weren't too happy.
They were tough. It's London. London is an amazing cosmopolitan city like nowhere else on the planet. I mean, I love London because the whole world comes here, and there's just infinite amount of different cultures and colourful experiences to be had. But if you don't have money and you don't have connections, it's tough. It's very tough.
You know, I remember reading that quote where you said, I think it's terrible they didn't tell me it was going to be like this when I was little. Life is the most brutal experience. I know a lot of people, a lot of people who, like yourself, who've achieved incredible things, have that kind of a lot of tragedy and tough stuff in the backstory. You lost your parents to cancer as well. How do you find the strength to go through some of these things?
Sometimes I didn't have much strength to go through things because I do think that the world is really an insane place. I think the world is brutal, violent, sadistic, dangerous, obviously, all of these things. And it's kind of miracle that anyone manages to survive. It truly is.
We're supposed to be civilized.
Yeah, yes, you're right. We call ourselves like civilized, and yet we still bomb the hell out of each other and blow children up to bits and break families apart, and it's so primitive.
Was religion ever a strong thing in the family at home?
No, not at all. I mean, on my mother's side, they used to go to church, so there's a sort of Church of Scotland, but it wasn't ever a really strong thing. On my father's side, they were very strong, politically motivated trade unionist socialists, and they were actually atheists. So religion for me is interesting because I think that religion should be the highest example of, moral example, ethical example of the best of humanity. And sadly, and I deeply, profoundly ironically, I see that for me, organised religion most often creates division, and more often than not.
How did you relate to, was you married briefly in the mid-80s to a German Hare Krishna devotee as well? How did you relate to that side of his?
Well, first of all, that was a huge mistake on my part, it has to be said, and I could explain that. I was very interested in all kinds of alternative things, and the Hare Krishna Western movement comes from Hindu faith, and I was interested in that because at the time I thought, well, they're radical and they're vegetarian, they clearly have some kind of very strong moral, ethical place. And actually, to be frank with you, I saw things in that movement at the time, I'll just be frank with you, that I thought were horrific, and I thought they were really quite fundamentalist. And I don't want to undermine them or to say negative things, but personally, that was my experience. That's what I saw. They actually sort of do the opposite of what they say they are, and that's disappointing.
Your second husband, Uri, who's the father of your two daughters, was a filmmaker and I think also a producer. You had obviously another sort of very tragic experience there, Daniel, who was stillborn in 1988. You said that taught you how fragile life was. How did it change the way you lived your life?
It was a massive wake-up call to have the direct experience of the death of one's baby. Anybody that's listening to me now that's had that knows anyone that's happened to, or perhaps, you know, had the experience themselves, will know what that's like, and it's earth-shattering, and your whole world is just kind of collapses. Now, when that happened to me, at the same time, there was a tremendous earthquake. I think it was in a part of Turkey, where a whole town kind of just fell away, killing the residents of that vicinity entirely. So you start to have this grand overview about life, and you can experience it very deeply at a personal level, but at the same time you go, whoa, hang on a minute, it isn't just me. This is happening to all of us. We're all like walking on this tightrope.
Does that, that experience you had in your life embed itself in your music in any way? I know the music's been described as having light and dark sort of undercurrents, but do you find that you put those emotions you've experienced into your music?
I think that the music that I've written over the years has always been an expression point for me. It's been a portal where I could access deep feelings. And I've always seen that this duality between the darkness and the light, and that they coexist. It's not one thing against the other. They're just there. They're just there. Life has all these potentialities. And so the music that I've ever made has always reflected that. It has beauty in it, and sweetness and softness, and, you know, something almost dreamlike. And then at the same time, there's a little twist, because then that has to be part of the picture. And I've always made music that way. There's the duality, and that it coexists. I could never just write a happy song, because I think it's not interesting, you know.
Right, we're going to trace your musical path and the defining moments in just a moment. More questions for you when 101 returns. Welcome back. You're watching 101. We're speaking with singer-songwriter and activist Annie Lennox. One defining moment in your life, after 3 years at the Royal Academy of Music, 3 days before your finals, apparently you just decided to leave and never go back.
Yeah.
That's quite a defining moment.
Well, I think it was cowardliness on my part, because I actually hadn't been to a history of music lecture in the whole time that I was at the Academy. I don't know how I got away with it. Sometimes I'm very clear about things. You know, how you can just be uncertain, and there's nothing worse than not quite really knowing, should I do this, should I do that? And then all of a sudden, I find that it just goes, bang, that's it. I know what I have to do. And then you make that resolution, and you just go forwards. And I think it was the right decision in the end. It
was around 1977. You were pretty much giving up hope on sort of, successful musical career. You were thinking about becoming a music teacher. Then you had that very fortuitous meeting with Dave Stewart. Tell me how that changed everything.
It's really like looking back on life, you know. When you're young, you don't have the benefit of hindsight, because you haven't made your life happen yet. When you're older, as I am now, you look back on the story and you go, hang on a minute, I met that person, and then they did this, and then that made that happen. And if we hadn't done X, Y, or Z, that wouldn't have happened. And it's all like serendipity in a lot of respects.
Now, when it came down to it, you obviously, and Dave was actually going through a tough time himself then. I think he had a drug problem. He'd been in a very bad car accident. If you had been through that kind of despair of trying to make things work, he was also down. How did you manage to find the path up?
It's a really odd thing, because both of us had a tremendous belief in each other as human beings, and we had a shared dream. That's the point. And I think sometimes the combination of numbers, like 1 + 1, is bigger than 2. You know, and in those times, you didn't think about career. I mean, you just didn't even think about that. You just had a dream, and you just wanted to make it happen. And you thought, I'll do it. I'll do it.
Well, you found that fantastic sound. 1983, Sweet Dreams Are Made of this huge hit, sort of created what the Eurythmics were. Also, but about a year later, you even went into depression. You were struggling with your vocal cords and stuff. You were in the middle of a huge success, and yet you were still also battling all these things.
Well, the thing is that with success comes momentum, which is great, but something you maybe weren't prepared for it. You know, up to the point before you're successful, you're a sort of quote-unquote ordinary person having a kind of quote-unquote ordinary life. But success comes. MTV really had a great deal to do with our launching of our success in America, hugely, because we were making videos, and those videos were played in everybody's living rooms. All of a sudden, bang, everybody knew who you were. And on a personal level, that's quite a maximum kind of shift. And it's a strange feeling going down a main street and knowing that everybody's rubbernecking you. It's a very weird thing. And I learned the technique of how to handle it at the time, which was don't give anybody any eye contact. You just kind of do that. And it made me very tense, and it made me a little bit unhappy because, you know, you're so objectified. You cease to be a normal person that can blend in and simply be anonymous, which I love to be, which I can be, believe it or not. I mean, I know that I'm well known, but I've played it my way. You won't see me very often on the front covers of magazines, and I don't play the celebrity game because I hate it. I am a musician, I'm an artist, I'm a communicator, but I never wanted people I never wanted to be on the front covers of particular magazines, you know, that are about your lifestyle and your kids and your dogs and your jacuzzis and stuff.
Your talent has certainly been recognised. You've collected so many awards, including a Golden Globe and an Oscar. One thing, though, that you were saying, that the loneliness you experienced while you were, you know, trying to get a break and so on. I wonder if you had any mentors. Did you have anyone who really took you under their wing?
Dave was my mentor. Dave was my mentor. And perhaps in some other way, I wasn't Dave's mentor, but I certainly was his lifesaver at the time. So we both contributed to each other's well-being and to the vision of what is it to be an artist? You know, what are we really about? What do we sound like? What do we look like? What are we trying to say?
And we've talked about your history and we've talked about music, but Annie, you're an incredible humanitarian too, and I think people are aware of how much you do. You were very instrumental in Live Aid and many other things since then. It's interesting that I know you're not a big fan of governments and diplomats and the way you feel they don't mobilize to deal with some of these issues. And you say we should be more dangerous, take more risks. What do you mean by that?
I think people need to be more engaged. I think what's happened to us is that we have really become such a consumeristic society that it has almost a hypnotic quality on us. But at the same time, you know, we live in a planet where billions of people go to sleep hungry, and billions of people don't get access to fundamental human rights of good health care or education, especially women. And you know, I don't want to sound like a naysayer, but what I don't understand is how can we have such a huge disparity when we have so many resources? We have the capacity to make tremendous change in the world.
And there are a few rare leaders, and I know your 2007 campaign, Sing campaign, which was launched globally and has raised millions of dollars, was to highlight HIV/AIDS in sub-Saharan Africa. That was influenced a lot by your time with Nelson Mandela and some of the things he said. Tell me about that time you spent with him and what progressed.
Having the opportunity to encounter Nelson Mandela, as I have had, it's a kind of miracle to me, to have an opportunity to encounter a man of peace, if you like, a man of change for the better, is an extraordinary experience. I mean, you must know it yourself. I'm sure that you've met extraordinary individuals, and there they are, and they have a certain aura about them. There was without any question. So just meeting Mandela face to face as an individual, sensing his stature and sensing his tremendous kind of humanity, was a real lesson for me and a turning point in my own head.
Interestingly enough, the HIV Positive T-shirts you wear quite often raise a few eyebrows, and they raise a lot of speculation about you as well. Why do you wear those? This is
a tool. This is a wonderful tool that was actually created by Zaki Ahmad, who's the founder of Treatment Action Campaign, who I'm a member of, and a current sort of, you know, I'm a member and activist with them, in solidarity with them. And I saw Zaki wearing this T-shirt back in 2004 in a very posh banquet that was being actually held for Mandela, and everybody was in their very fancy evening clothes, and there was Zaki wearing this T-shirt. And Zaki is HIV positive, as are so many members of Treatment Action Campaign. And I thought, this is an incredible thing. I would like to see the leaders of the South African political parties all wearing this T-shirt. I'd like to see that image emblazoned on the front pages, on posters. I'd like to see it everywhere, so that they could say, let's destigmatize HIV.
Apart from the HIV, which is a big part of your activism, you spoke out about, you've been on the anti-war rallies, you've spoken out about the bombing of Gaza and the Israeli-Palestinian issues and stuff. Do you find yourself now, with all that you take on, do you find yourself spread a bit too thin with all the activism?
I can be. If I'm not careful, that is something very dangerous for me. And what's really difficult is that a lot, you know, for all the things that I show up to do, and I do them because I want to be there, I sincerely want to be there, I want to engage. It's not about my ego. It's actually just about me as a human being participating. But for all the things that I do, I can tell you there's about 5 times as many things that I have to say no to. So that's very frustrating for me, because there are so many issues that we have to feel passionately about. This is it. This is your life. This is one chance. This is it. And if you have children, you want them to have a good life too. You want to see that the world is sane, the world is humane, the world cares, that we care. And that's what it's about.
So talking about that one chance in life, what's on your bucket list? What are the things you need to get done?
My life has become something quite extraordinary, really. I always wanted to be more proactive when it came to issues of human rights and justice. I always did. And now I'm able to combine being the artist that I am with my political activism. When I say political, I say with a small p, by the way, because I don't really engage with political parties. I love the NGOs of this world. And there's so much to do. I'm never bored. I never have enough time to read the books that I want to read. I never have enough time to see the films I want to see. And sometimes I just like to sit very quietly, because just being quiet is such a gift as well, instead of just being chasing, going, like we do in London. Everybody's chasing, everybody's working, everybody's doing, do. But sometimes you just need to learn how to be still, and that's important too.
When it comes to legacy, how would you like to be remembered?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's a strange thing to think about legacy. I don't think that... I think those people who think about legacy while they're alive, maybe they're invested in it for the wrong reasons. I mean, I think that sounds egoic to me, and I don't want to be that egoic person that thinks, oh, I want my name up in lights and I want it on a plaque here and I want that. No. I'd rather just be in the moment, face the day, seize the day, as they say, do the best I can. And I would like to think that I am a positive force for myself, for my kids, and as a person in the planet, I want to just be engaged. But how people think of me, hopefully they think kindly of me, but that's good enough.
And Lennox, more power to you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you very much.